Welcome to the show, the podcast that dives into the battles women fight on the front lines and within. I'm your host, Olivia Nunn. This series is proudly sponsored by MilMentor, the military's community's largest on-demand mentorship network, built by veterans, for veterans, and their families. From job support to networking, find your mentor at milmentor.com. Now, let's dive into today's episode where resilience, service, and strength take center stage. This is Women of War, and I'm here with a very good longtime friend, Michelle Horn, a fellow public affairs officer from the United States Army. Michelle, thank you so much for spending time with me here on Women of War.
Thanks, Olivia. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, so, you and I met, gosh, I don't even remember when we met because it seems like yesterday, but then at the same time, I've known you for a few years, but you've just been someone incredible in our career space and someone that I just know that was always cheerful and just had something great to say. And so I'm just super excited that we could dive into your story. So let's start at the beginning. Why the Army? Why did you want to join service?
I always wanted to do something with service. I wasn't sure what. When I was in college, I thought I was going to go into something like the FBI or something like that. And then it came upon me one day, I had just gotten there and my RA said, "Hey, we're doing a pool party for this program called ROTC. Do you want to come check it out?" And I had just gotten to college at Stetson University down in Florida. And I said, "Yeah, I'll go to that." And, as soon as I met the people, I was really excited about it. And I'd always, like I said, I'd always been interested in serving. And then that opportunity came up. And next thing I knew, I was enrolled in ROTC and I just fell in love with the program and the ability to come into the Army. I didn't know you could be enlisted or an officer. So when I was going through initial thoughts of enlisting, they said, "Well, you don't get to go to college right away." And I said, "Well, that's not going to work." So I thought that door was closed. But of course, one thing you learn the further and further you get along in your career is no doors are actually closed. There's always a way to open up. And I learned that very quickly with the Army. And just it led to an amazing 21-year career where I got to meet great people like you and do amazing things for our country.
So you came in, you weren't a public affairs officer first, because that's the one thing that we don't do, right? You're something else, and then you transitioned to public affairs. So what were you when you first came in?
Yeah, I majored in accounting. So the military made the great choice of making me a transportation officer, which had nothing to do with accounting whatsoever. But accounting probably wasn't the right field for me. Again, I had thought that would be a fast way to get into the FBI. And ended up, somebody told me, "Oh, you can't do accounting now that you're just going into the Army." And that made me say, well, of course I'm going to finish this degree in accounting and I'm not going to switch to something. But I ended up being in transportation and I went right away to Germany. I was a platoon leader of a PLS, palletized load system platoon, ended up moving into heavy equipment transporters, which are the biggest trucks in the Army. And that was where everything started. I went on a deployment to Kosovo, and I really got my love for Europe and understanding everything that was going on in the European sphere that ended up following me throughout my career.
So you started in something that you didn't even study for, which I think is kind of the norm for the Army, right? You studied for this, but we're going to put you over here. Did you enjoy what you did, even though that's not what you thought you were going to do?
I did. My unit had a lot of women officers, and I had a great battalion commander who took us under his wing, and his wife had been prior service and they took us under their wing. And not having a lot of immediate military experience, with my family, I really probably needed that transition. Like coming into the Army with this really receptive, unit was super helpful. So I love that. I learned to love trucks, and it was fun becoming managing a platoon. And then later I became a truck company commander. And, I just had a great group of soldiers and it was such an exciting experience. I love traveling. So, you're always on the road. We were doing exercises throughout Germany. You don't really sit still you don't stay on base when you're in a truck unit. You're always training on the roads. So that was a lot of fun.
You just mentioned that you really didn't have a whole lot of military in your family. So when you told them like, hey, I know you think I'm just at college, but I'm signing up to this thing called ROTC. And oh, by the way, I'm going to commission as an officer when I'm done. And here I am now an officer. What did your family think?
I think they were at first a little nervous, and maybe they always were a little nervous. I think, throughout the whole time I was in the military, but my grandfather had been in World War II. I had family members in Vietnam, and I think they all very much respected service. They respected what people gave up when they serve and what they're deciding to give. So they were very respectful of it, but it was a learning curve. It was a learning curve for all of us. So,
so much of our time in service was marked by Iraq and Afghanistan, right? I like to say that we were the war children, right? That was our service, especially when I remember coming in. The old NCOs, they couldn't mentor us on that. They were great at garrison, right? How to be sharp and how to take care of your soldiers, but they couldn't necessarily prepare us for what we were about to embark upon. What was that for you when you first came in and being a young officer and a leader and working with this transition that we're about to find ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I think when I first got to Germany, I went to Kosovo, and that was kind of a wake-up call. I had the opportunity to lead a platoon, and I was learning from my NCOs who had been to Bosnia at that time. So there were a lot of kind of conflicts that there had been happening, but really, 9/11 happened when I was in Germany as a platoon leader, and you're right, we were all shocked. I mean, I remember people saying to me, we had a training. It was just our regular sergeant's time training, if you can remember that. Yes. From way back in the day. And, we had our sleeves rolled down, and normally you would have at the BDUs, you would have them up in the summer months, and our sleeves are down. And someone said, well, why do you guys have your sleeves down? You're just training. And we said, well, you train like you fight. And they were like, yeah, but you're logistics. You're never going to be on the front line, and then really in Iraq, logisticians were the front line. We at the very beginning, especially, and then throughout, riding on the routes, the main supply routes was
MSR1, Tampa.
That's where the problem was, So, and I remember one of my truck drivers saying to me that when they were enlisting, somebody asked them what they wanted to do, and they said, oh, I really want to get into, I like driving trucks. I want to go into trucks. And they said, that's it. The recruiter said, well, that's dangerous. And this was an infantry soldier telling a truck driver, hey, you're choosing a dangerous path, so, it really shifted. And I think you're right. People didn't understand immediately how much the logisticians would be on the front line, which is kind of ludicrous because they always have been. This is not new. This is Red Ball Express. I mean, this has been going on for, over 100 years at the supply lines, which was where it was dangerous, so.
You bring up something interesting in that part of the conversation about it's not new. It's also not new that women have been there, right? This whole concept that women aren't at the front line, but here we are, because it was very asymmetrical. There was no front line. It wasn't this linear concept that we had read in textbooks when it came to like World War I and World War II type concept of a battle line. But here we are in this asymmetrical warfare where every operation was a combat operation, right? Whether you're moving people or equipment down a stretch of highway, you could potentially meet the enemy. And to say that as a woman that you wouldn't find yourself there was, funny to me, because you and I both know that we did meet the enemy there. So for you, what was that like? What were your stories like over there?
Oh gosh, I really had an incredible unit. When I deployed to Iraq, I was a company commander. There were moments, I can remember I was well liked by my battalion commander. My first sergeant really cared about me. And, I had a great team of leaders, my sergeant major. And I can remember I had gone on my very first convoy, and I was actually meeting the unit there. I took command in the desert in 2003. And as as I went on my first convoy, everybody went up to my driver, my battalion commander, my first sergeant, and the sergeant major, and they said, "Hey, make sure you take care of her." And I was like, "Okay, great. So thanks. That's sweet. Whatever." So we went on our convoy, and my driver, who was a younger man than me, and I wasn't that old. I mean, God, I was like 26. I wasn't really old or anything. Younger guy would not do what I said because he had been directed by the first sergeant and the sergeant major and battalion commander to take care of me. And I swiftly said, "Okay, this isn't going to work." We came back to the FOB after that first convoy, and I said, "This driver doesn't understand that he needs to follow my directions. And also, first sergeant and sergeant major and battalion commander, please don't ever do that again. You completely undermined me on my very first time going out with my unit." So, I mean, I think you have things like that. It wasn't meant to take anything away from me. It was really, a caring kind of thing, but I didn't understand what the consequences were. And from there, I had a unit that had 25% women, and I had 5 married couples within my unit, which was crazy because my unit was the only deployable unit on Fort Knox, Kentucky. And so there were men and women who had been stationed together, and there was nowhere else to put them. They were the only truck drivers on post. So they were married and in my company. So I had to navigate that. There are a lot of crazy things, and then we had the moments that were dicey, of course, again, like we said, these were convoys in Iraq in the early times. And we were just learning about IEDs and everything, but we were very fortunate. We had really good training before we deployed, ended up doing 3 deployments, and not one of my soldiers was killed during that time. So I was very lucky.
It's as you're talking, it just reminds me of it. The simplest things can sometimes be, the thing that just gets in the way. But at the same time, it's the thing that we look on and we can laugh about it, but it just makes us so much stronger. And as you're talking about the things that you did as a leader and just how at the time when you're going through it, you're like, man, that just really sucks. But it has made you and me and others that were in that situation such a better, more well-rounded leader today because of those experiences. And while I don't miss it, I miss the people, right?
Oh, of course.
You talked about 3 deployments downrange. I did the same too, and nobody wants to go downrange, but you learn so much from those experiences. What is your biggest takeaway from your experiences downrange that you wouldn't change? I mean, nobody, like I said, nobody wants to go, but you did.
God, I mean, there were so many lessons. And then I did actually deploy a 4th time the first time to Afghanistan as well, and with the 82nd. And I think the camaraderie that I had with my fellow soldiers, and then really some of the women that experienced some crazy things that you go through when you're deployed, from everything from the way people look at you and treat you to I came back after a year in Afghanistan. I was public affairs with the 82nd Airborne Division. I mean, this is a big unit, a big mission, and I had a service member that you can tell I went really joint after the 82nd because I always say service member instead of soldiers.
It's a PAO in us.
I know. I had a fellow paratrooper with me who said to me, "Ma'am, it's been a great deployment." And we worked together like the whole time. And he said, "You are really good at your job. And I can tell that you really care and you've done a great job. I mean, you don't belong here, but it was great." And I'm like, what? We just spent a year together and you're saying I don't belong in the 82nd because I'm a woman? It's just those kind of ludicrous things that happen. But at the same time, I think that all made me stronger. I think there was so much goodness that came out of I feel like every deployment, your understanding of the world just grows and grows and grows, and then later I went to the Pentagon and, ended up working for the Secretary of Defense. And it was like getting a doctorate, or I mean, that's a pretty strong claim, I guess, at least another master's degree in world issues when you start speaking on behalf of the secretary and of the department. It was pretty incredible. So I look back on the years that I was in the military, and I just think every single opportunity that came up, it was just so amazing that I got to do those things and be a part of the changes that have happened over the world in the last 20 years or 25 years, I guess. So,
you talked about that one experience where this soldier tells you like, you're great, but, and you and I both know there were quite a few of those, you're great, but, and I'm just curious as to what were your great buts for you? And how were you able to like work through them? Because I know half the time I wanted to punch their lights out. I'm just curious what your buts were and how you worked through them.
Well, that particular NCO, I definitely wanted to punch his lights out, but I, of course, did not. I mean, I think a lot of times for me, I think I still, even if something happens today, I'm just in shock when somebody doesn't treat me with the respect that I believe I deserve, and especially if it's just because I'm a woman. Like how does that, it shocks me, But I think that I take all those moments that happened and I try to use them for good, especially now. I spend a lot of time now talking to other women and trying to be a good role model. And just, I think those experiences just make you stronger and give you more confidence. And, you think, I can remember coming back from Afghanistan and sitting down with other women and us just kind of laughing about the things that were said in the way that you can only laugh about them if somebody else has gone through it, that kind of moment, and saying, okay, I'm not alone. And this is not, again, it's not new, like we talked about. I mean, women have been serving in combat zones for so long. And, the fact that people now seem to be continuing to have this conversation like they're surprised. I mean, I don't know about you, but my parents I grew up with the television playing MASH. I mean, women have been serving in combat zones and been in dangerous situations for so long. And it just is shocking that this conversation is still going on the way it is. To me, I can't.
Yes, 100%. Yes, right. We've had TV. It's not like it just came about, and we have social media, which is another 24/7 news cycle, if you will. And it does just blow my mind that people are like, "You serve, you can serve." I'm like, yes, and there have been thousands before me. It just, I don't understand like why they can't understand.
I agree. And this conversation now about physical fitness standards and whether or not women are meeting the same physical fitness standards as men, and how can they, their bodies are different. Last night my husband and I were talking about it, and it was funny because he said, if a 250-pound man was serving next to me and got hit and I needed to carry him, I would need some help. And he said, no different than if you were standing next to him, you would need some help. It just doesn't equate. And I don't think people understand that it's not just women are smaller and slighter than men and can't do as much. There's plenty of skinny, scrawny guys out there that can't do it either. Yeah. And there's plenty of strong women who can do a lot more than I can do, so it's just, it's these comparisons. It boggles my mind that we keep going backwards. And I was really proud of the time I was in the military that things went forward so much. I mean, from having children, my kids when they were born 20 years ago, I got 6 weeks of maternity leave, to now they get 3 months, and men get to take paternity leave, and they get to fully form a family and grow better, stronger Americans because of it.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't regress. I just hope we can find a way through this time and keep moving forward.
I 100% agree. Back to what you're talking about in terms of standards, the part that I think where the conversation is wrong is that we keep trying to say that we're equal and that we're the same, when in fact we should have never had that conversation to begin with, because biologically we're not same. We are never meant to be same. We are born different. And that's the part that we need to recognize. And that is the part that we need to say, and that is okay. our differences is what makes the whole better, right? And I know we don't say diversity anymore, which is a whole nother podcast that we can have about, but that is what makes our fighting force what it is. Our differences, our uniqueness, our ability to think different, to be able to, work together through all of those, whether it's your height, your sex, your gender, your beliefs, your thought processes, all of those things is what makes us an amazing, dynamic, world dominating military.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I was on a wonderful women's retreat it was for women veterans about a year ago with Outward Bound California. And I was with these incredible other veterans. And there were a couple Marines, one of which who was a lioness, served in Afghanistan and went out and met with women in different tribes they got information and tried to have goodwill, throughout. And there was a lot that went into that. And there was no one that could do it other than women. I mean, men, or I shouldn't say there's no one, only women could do that. Men would never have been able to become part and really have those conversations with that part of their society. And it was critical. I mean, every society involves both women and men making decisions, whether it's in the public and in the private, that varies, but having the ability for our service members to be able to get in there, that was really important. And, it was just a role that couldn't be filled by anybody other than women. And I hate that we don't acknowledge that enough.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsor, and I want to come back to where women have been serving. MilMentor is the military community's largest on-demand mentorship network built by veterans. You pick your own mentor and as many as you want from over 1,000. Whether you're a military spouse looking for resume help, or maybe you're a veteran needing to build your network, or perhaps you are about to transition, or maybe you're looking to become an entrepreneur. There are recruiters, executives, and professionals across fields waiting to help you. Sign up as a mentor or a mentee at milmentor.com. So just before the break, we were talking about how there are some roles that women are just going to be able to shine through because they are the fit. They are the ones that are going to get things done. And it boggles my mind when we look through history, because we've talked about how we've been there, right? We've been there since the founding of America. We've served in roles. And it wasn't until just recently that we legally have been able to serve in every single position within the military, but we've been there. But what astounds me, it goes back to how women have contributed to the fighting force. And if it wasn't for women, what men do today, they wouldn't be able to do. And here's a great example. They love to tote about being a paratrooper, right? And you talked about being in the 82nd. The concept of being a paratrooper wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for a woman. If a woman hadn't jumped from the plane to prove that this was a possibility, we wouldn't have paratroopers. And that is something, worth noting, but yet we don't really talk about that. That's just an example. Some of the greatest spies through World War II were women. And you can try to rewrite history all you want, but that's the truth. And again, it has nothing to do with us being better or equal. It's that we bring a different part to the whole.
Oh, you bring up such a good point. And, that's why it's critical, especially now with, we've seen evidence, you mentioned DEI earlier, of our histories being erased on government websites and in different ways that it's been captured in the past. I think it's critical more than ever for women to get their stories told, to get out there and talk about what they've gone through in the military and in other career fields for that matter. But, the Women's Memorial, I'm a member of the Army Women's Foundation, which supports the Army Museum for Women, the Army Women's Museum. I mean, those are places that people can go tell their stories and have it captured so that we can remember them, because you're right. Nobody looks back on those stories. Those aren't the ones that are remembered. And that's a thing that goes on well outside of the military. I mean, how many scientists have we later find out that it was really a woman who came up with a theory or proved something, and all the credit went to men. Nobel Peace Prizes went to men. Right. I think it's so important for us to get our history captured by places that are going to preserve it, that we can. And up until 9 years ago, I would have said our archives and places like that are good places to preserve it. But I think we have to go beyond that into other institutions that are and private institutions that are safeguarding what we've all done. And podcasts like this.
And this is a big reason as to, and not because of what's currently going on, it's just in general, right? Mm-hmm. Women just don't identify as being a veteran. And there's a lot of reasons to that. But what I want is that I want women, whether they're currently serving or, they've just recently transitioned, or maybe they transitioned 20, 30 years ago. I want them to hear these stories and go, oh my gosh, I served too, and I loved every moment of it, and I should tell my story, right?
You're so right. And, people I think you're right that a lot of veterans, not just women, unfortunately, don't understand that you don't have to be a retiree. You don't have to serve for 20 years. If you honorably were discharged from the military after just a few years, you're a veteran. You did it, and so you deserve that credit, and you should definitely make sure that you register with the VA, register with any other, just get out there and make sure that you are getting the benefits that you deserve and are owed for signing up.
Absolutely. We talk about how women are the invisible veteran, but I want to talk about not just being the invisible veteran, because oftentimes people just don't even think about us. When you say veteran, they think about a male, right? Definitely not a woman. But I want you to walk us back to a time, because I know this happens all the time, and it did for me, when you were in service, where you were just challenged, right? Whether it wasn't a salute that was returned, they just didn't want to call you ma'am, right? Just because, and you knew it had nothing to do with your ability to be a great leader. It was all for the fact they just wanted to shove it in your face that I'm not going to do it because you're a woman. I mean, you've alluded to a little bit, but I'm just curious.
Oh, I think one of the most obvious moments that this happened to me, it was so in my face, was I had recently graduated from the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. I was the only captain to graduate from that class. The rest were all majors, so I was the most junior person there. And I was pregnant with my second child, my daughter. And I reported to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I was, at that time, I had not gone to airborne school. Again, I was a captain, and I had been deployed, although I don't think anybody there recognized what my patch was because it wasn't one of the divisions. But I got there and I was pregnant and I was wearing a black beret. At that time in the military, we were all wearing black berets, except if you were in a unit like the 82nd. Forces Command required you wear these black berets, and they hadn't arrived to Fort Bragg yet. So there were very few people walking around in black beret, almost none walking around without jump wings. And here I was pregnant. And I can just remember soldiers would walk past me and go, oh, no. I mean, they would literally look at me and just kind of say, no, I'm not. No, that's not what my Army looks like. And it was really hard to deal with that. I was promotable. I went up to a senior officer in the unit. I didn't know anybody at Fort Bragg. And I said, hey, sir, would you be willing to do my promotion? And he looked at me, he goes, isn't there anyone else? And I thought, okay, I'm being promoted to major. I mean, I've done enough to get to this point. Hopefully more. Like I said, at that point, I already had 4 deployments under my belt, and just the disrespect and the lack of encouragement, the lack of really everything that I got when I got to Fort Bragg was disheartening. By the time I left, things were going much better. I went to jump school 9 months after my daughter was born, deployed less than a year after that. And, things were, I had proven myself with the 82nd, aside from that one staff sergeant. But it was always hard. It was just like, I think when I got out of the military, I missed it too. And I do miss it times, but gosh, all of a sudden my shoulders relaxed. I was able to smile more and have a little bit more fun. And I just feel like I was able to be myself for the first time in like 21 years. I was able to just kind of be me. And that's an amazing thing to think, wow, all these years I was trying to be somebody that I won't say I wasn't, but just trying to fit a mold.
Yeah.
So,
you bring up a very interesting point, right? I like to say it's like this defense mechanism and learning how to remove that, right? And for me, people say, Olivia, you're scary. Like you talk about smiling. I have to like retrain myself to smile more and to laugh more because it was a defense mechanism for me to like keep my face neutral. And when it's neutral, it looks like I have this resting bitch face. And I didn't smile and I didn't laugh because it was, to me, a vulnerability. It was, if I did that, it was feminine, and feminine equals being soft, which meant you are weak. And I couldn't show any of that. So therefore it was more hard. Right.
Yeah. I found myself kind of hunched over. Like I was hiding, but I wasn't. I mean, I was always in the room, but I didn't want to be like sitting too tall and proud. Nope. I'm just back here doing my thing. And it wasn't that I wasn't leading, but it was definitely, I found myself just trying, just not having the posture that I could have had. And even now I'm constantly kind of like straightening up because I see myself still doing that. And I hate that, you change yourself and you change how you talk. I remember my first time I stood in front of my company, and they were, it was a big company. Head companies are pretty large, about 300 people. And I stood in front of them and I thought, well, I need to be like Captain America here, So I said, well, troops. And then I left and I was like, that was so fake. And luckily I had a company that had a lot of women. So they were used to being around women, and I was able to turn and become myself again and just be myself. So, but
yeah, I can relate to so much of that, right? Just the things that we do just to, I don't know if survive is the right word, but just to really be the officer that you needed to be, whether it's an officer enlisted, right? To be successful, because no one shows up to the military just to be there, right? You want to be great at your job, and to be great, you're constantly questioned. Are you even supposed to be here? Right. And there's so much of that battle that you go through every single day of, yes, I am. And no thanks to you, I have to yet start and prove this again on top of the work that I've already got loaded on to my schedule. But let me start again.
It's so crazy. And, I can remember being at the Pentagon towards the end of my career, and there were, the press office was made of a lot of officers and senior civilians. And we had, at that time, we had a high percentage were African-American of the active duty group, especially the Army side. We had a bunch of, and it was great. And I remember looking around and standing there with the colonel who was in charge of us, looking around the room one day, and he and I are just like, this is awesome. That we have women and people of color. And, do you think that there's not a time I can even imagine that white man would stand in front of a room and go, look at us, just look at us. They don't, it doesn't even pass the mind, that you would look around the room and say, wow, we've really diversified here, and it was a strong group of leaders. It was a great group of public affairs professionals that were transparent and told the story of our military with honor, and it's very cool to be around that and to know that you're part of something that is just so open and transparent, not only to the American people, but open in general to let people know that, it does. It takes all of us. We are what all make it better. Right.
Yeah.
Like you were saying earlier.
Absolutely. So you did, I think you said 21 years.
Yes.
You did 21 years and you said, okay, it's time for me to hang up my boots. But you didn't stop serving. You've been actually active within the military community. You've been serving with the Fisher House. And for those that don't know, think Ronald McDonald, but for the military. And so you've just been very busy with the Fisher House. Tell us what's been going on with the Fisher House, and besides the Fisher House, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I became the vice president of communications at Fisher House right after I was still in the Army. It was when I was on terminal leave. I came over to Fisher House Foundation, and we have a network of houses across the country where military and veteran families can stay for free while their loved ones receiving medical care at a VA or military hospital. And it's been an incredible experience. I've not only been able to use the skills I did already have, but I also have gained so many more communication skills. I'm writing stories, and I'm taking photos, and I'm learning how to use parts of the website. I won't say I know the back end because my team would really disagree with that. But, social media, just getting better at all those skills. Whereas at the Pentagon and a lot of my time in the military was more focused on leadership and also on media outreach. That was the big part. So, it's been a great experience, but most importantly, I've been able to meet families that have benefited from Fisher House and hear their stories. I mean, it is a absolute requirement as a woman working at Fisher House to wear waterproof mascara, because otherwise you're just going to look like a mess every single day, because those stories are so heartwarming when people talk about being able to be with their loved ones during really challenging times. And I think the one statement that every guest has said to me at some point during our conversation has been, if it wasn't for Fisher House, we couldn't have done this. We've saved more than 435,000 families over, I think it's $650 million over the last 30 years. And this year we opened our 100th house, which is in North Chicago. But it's not the end. We've got a house under construction in New York, right outside of West Point. And we've got houses we're building houses all over. So we've got many more to go. So
I love
it's
that.
very exciting.
And especially for, our generation that went through, two fronts of war, Afghanistan and Iraq, there's still so much that we're unpacking, right? TBI, mental health. And cancer. Cancer is the number one killer for our generation. And a lot of people don't realize that. And the cost to be able to treat that. And so organizations like Fisher House do really provide such an amazing resource for our families. So I love that you get to be part of something big. And you talked about, you hear these stories. How do you work through that trauma and that grief and that anxiety? Because I know that can't be easy when you're listening to these stories, and especially as somebody who's been a storyteller like yourself. Like, how do you work through that?
I think I just grow from every story I hear, and I think it just gives me more strength to keep pushing forward and doing more. I think I often feel like I'm not doing enough. And so it gives me the energy to keep pushing, because there's so many people that need help out there. And it's not just the military. I mean, there's so many ways to get involved. During the pandemic, I trained on how to become a hospice worker. So I do some hospice work here and there, although with the pandemic ending, or at least travel and everything picking up, I am on the road a lot, so I don't get to do as much of that anymore because I can't commit to people the way I could. But I think there's so many ways to get involved, and it's not always the military community that is the passion that people will have, even coming out of the military. But it's so important to step up and show up for the people in your community, and whatever that community you define. Whether it's your neighborhood, your state, the people that like to do underwater basket weaving, it doesn't matter. Whatever the community you find is, being there for that community and finding ways to get involved and help out is important. I think standing up for what you believe in, especially on the political front, is extremely important right now. And again, this is our right. This is what we fought for. This is what we continue to, I continue to fight for, is our Constitution and what we have as a country. And I think it's so important for everybody to stand up and do that. Write a letter to your congressman, get out there and, hold up a sign if you can, if you want to, if that's the way you feel. But take a moment and do something that makes the world a little bit better of a place. And I feel like there's an endless array of things you can do to make that happen,
You just shared with us a little bit of legacy and vision, right? In terms of why you serve with the Fisher House and getting involved in community, why we should get involved. For those that are listening, particularly women that are listening to this, what would you want them to feel, especially after, your lessons learned in the military and about service?
That they do have community. I think sometimes as a woman, especially in the military, you feel alone and you don't realize how many people are really going through similar things. I mean, look, Olivia, you and I are on here today as two retired military officers. And I think we can constantly find people out there who feel the same way. You just have to open your mind, open your heart, pick up the phone, send that email, because that community exists. And getting involved and being part of it is empowering. It allows you to know there's strength. They always say there's strength in numbers, and there really is. When you open that line of communication with other women out there, you'll find that you are empowered to do more. I constantly find that strength coming from the wonderful women that I've served with, and some men who have given me confidence as well.
I love that you said men too, because I don't want people to think, oh, this is a story about bashing men, because it's not, right? There is allyship with men, but I want to be truthful that we've also had a lot of roadblocks with men. And I would say there's probably been some women too that have provided roadblocks in our career, if we're going to be honest.
You bring up a really great point, Olivia. I think that it's critical that we lift each other up. And I was recently talking to a group of young JROTC women, and that was the message I told them, is that, as you get stronger, as you get further, make sure you turn back and pull the person right behind you up with you, because it takes us all, giving each other strength. And that is so important. It's not a competition. It's united, we can do so much, right?
Absolutely. So let's shift around a little bit to a different part of this, the lightning round. And so what is a song that has carried you through a dark season?
Oh my gosh. I would say, of course, now I can't think of a single thing, but I would say something like Firework, or so, I can't even think of the words, but some of the Katy Perry songs that are really strong, or some of those pop songs that I used to listen to mostly with my daughter. They weren't the songs that I grew up with, but they were the ones that me and my daughter sang screaming in the car, that always kind of lift me up, even though they're not the ones that I really grew up with and probably have that meaning. They're the ones that, I found me with my next generation singing at the top of our lungs, that were so empowering.
I love that. A quote or scripture that you live by?
I think I have a quote. Actually, I have it over here. I'm going to grab it and read it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Let's see. I have this one that I recently captured by Gandhi. As human beings, our greatness lies not so much in being able to remake the world as is being able to remake ourselves. And I think being able to do the self reflection and grow helps make the world a better place too.
I think that's so important, especially within our community, because of transition, right? We've given so much to be in that uniform. And as we step out of that uniform, we do have to do the work deep inside and then be able to find ourselves, right? So I really love that. What habit has kept you grounded?
I've always found a way to exercise. sometimes when I haven't, I find that I'm not as grounded. So, for a long time I was running. I find hiking my passion now. And recently I've gotten into doing Pilates.
Oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. For you, what does strength look like?
I think having the courage to admit mistakes is a big part. I mean, I've had some ups and downs in my life. And certainly for me, a lot of my struggles have been over the last few years as I've figured out what I want to do, and really some issues with my own family, and having the courage to admit that, and then to just say, okay, things weren't perfect, but I'm going to move forward is, I think that having that courage to look in and admit your mistakes is really important.
I like that. So for the woman who's listening and who may be dealing with her own storm, her own trauma right now, who doesn't believe that she could survive, but we know that she can, what would you say to her?
You can. You can. I think I had some really dark moments in my time, even though I know I'm always smiling and I always look like I have everything under control, or I think I kind of look like I do. There's so much going on behind the scenes for every single person. You don't know what's going on in there. And it's important to know that you're not alone. You're not the only one feeling like you're just trying to make it through the next day. So knowing that you're not alone, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, hey, can we just talk for a minute to somebody? It's surprising how hard it is to ask for help, but it'll be equally as surprising to know how easy it is for people to say, of course. Everybody wants, if you know somebody that you think you can call, they want to help you. There's no doubt about it. If you just even have an inkling that you could call that person, they want to be there for you. So reach out, know that there are people for you. And if you're past this stage, check on your friends, check on everybody and make sure they're okay. Don't be afraid to call and just say, hey, I was just thinking about you today. Because those kind of messages can go so far.
I 1000% agree with everything that you said. Smiles hide a lot, and check on people, call them, hug them, because you never know if that can save someone's life. And so as we wrap up, what's the last thing that you want to leave with people, and where can they find you?
So I would like to leave with people that they need to step up, get involved, and show up for their communities. To me, that's really critical. And you can find me in a number of places. I'm on LinkedIn, and I will check messages there. I'm also, there's information how to reach me through fisherhouse.org. But those are probably the easiest ones. And if you're on fisherhouse.org, feel free to check out our other programs. And if you need help and you're in the situation where you're looking for a place to stay during a hospital situation, we are there for you. So go to fisherhouse.org for more information too.
Michelle, thank you so much for spending your time with me, sharing your story. I can literally probably spend all day talking to you just because of just our love of storytelling, the people that we know, and the adventures that you've had. So thank you so much.
I agree. This is the most easy conversation I've had in a long time. Thanks, Olivia.
It's not so the Pentagon media press for.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Women of War, proudly sponsored by Mill Mentor, where a military community finds its mentors. Until next time, keep showing up, speaking out, and standing strong.